Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm doing another landscape in oil pastel. This time it's going to be a seascape with some nice crashing waves. Like the previous time, I'm going to be working on canvas rather than paper. The oil pastels I'm using are the Chinese Jieso brand. First I'm sketching out the line of the horizon, or the line of the water, and then I'm going to sketch out the shape of the clouds, and then I'm going to work around them with a light blue pastel. Now with the oil pastels you do have the option to work from dark to light, meaning that I could just draw the sky or color the sky blue and then draw the clouds on top of that. But here, because I want to create a greater range of value and I want some of the lightest portions of the clouds to be completely white, I'm just going to reserve the white space and work around it. So I'm applying the light phthalo blue. That's probably the best way I could describe it, even though I don't know the exact names or the designations of these oil pastels. So it's something like a light phthalo blue, and I'm going to use that for the sky. And once I have enough material, I just start blending with my finger. I'm going to go around the shape of the clouds. There's going to be like a group or a mass of clouds in the middle, and then there's going to be the waves in the lower part, the lower portion of the canvas. So normally when I work in oil pastel, I work on either on drawing paper that has a little bit of texture, or I work on UART sanded paper. But this one and the previous one will be done on canvas on cardboard. And I find that this surface works pretty well with oil pastel. And it also has kind of a painterly look and feel as well. And the only difference is, of course, that I'm working in dry media. So once I have that blue area done, I added a touch of this lighter violet color here and there. But then I started working on the clouds, and to establish some of the shadow areas in the clouds, I use the same light blue first, and then I'm going to put in some even darker blues a little bit later. So I'm blending them with my finger as usual. Most of the time I prefer to blend with my finger, and of course I use multiple fingers in order to minimize the amount of muddying or blending of colors when I don't need that. Here I'm working around the edges of the clouds and adding some smaller shapes with a white oil pastel. Sometimes I will want to create like a wispy cloud effect, maybe add some smaller shapes slightly detached from the rest of this mass of clouds. Sometimes I will want to dab on that a little bit and soften the edge. Sometimes I will want to preserve a clean edge. So I'm just going to play around with that until I'm happy with the appearance of my clouds. Now as for the reference, I'm going to put that in the description if you want to check it out. But in my reference, I liked the appearance of the clouds, but I didn't really like the appearance of the waves. It was a little bit too complex, and I wanted something a little bit bigger, simpler, and more striking. So I will go with something a little bit different, like a single larger wave, and we're going to have some greenish tones there in the bottom portion of the canvas. Here we're going to have some more of the bluish colors. So you can see that here, mixing the white and the blue, I was able to achieve some very smooth, very soft transitions. So the clouds already look fairly natural, fairly realistic, but I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to make some more changes to this in order to increase the range of value and make these clouds even more three-dimensional. You can see that near the horizon I drew a bunch of smaller shapes, like smaller distant clouds, and I'm going to make the edges on some of them a little bit sharper, a little bit cleaner, others a little bit softer. Now I picked up darker blue, and this is kind of difficult to describe this color. It's a very dull, darker, like an ultramarine maybe color. And I'm going to use it to draw some of these darker clouds, or darker parts of those clouds, in front of this group of clouds. I'm going to want to have some of these shapes slightly detached from the rest here at the bottom, and then in the middle I'm going to have one larger dark shape. In some places I'm going to have a clean edge, like a stark contrast between the white and the darker blue, and then in the middle of that large mass of clouds I'm just going to make a slightly softer transition from the darker blue onto the lighter blue and ultimately white. So here I'm making that smoother transition, and it looks like the clouds are gathering, large massive clouds are gathering on the horizon. That's basically what I wanted to achieve, but there's still a little bit more work to be done here at the bottom. Even though I feel like this top portion of the paper is a little bit, of this canvas rather, is going to be a little bit simpler than the wave and the waves themselves, but we'll get to that eventually. Here you can see that I'm using the edge of this white oil pastel to draw some of the thinner, smaller shapes, like the edges of the clouds which are catching a little bit of light. And I'm adding a little bit of bluish color where needed, a little bit of white, and maybe some other similar colors. As a final touch, I will just add a few lighter details here and there in this large group of clouds to make it a little bit more complex. Like maybe there are some edges or some surfaces of those clouds which are sticking out a little bit and catching a little bit of light from the light source. And with that I will pretty much finish the clouds and move on to the sea. For the sea I will use a slightly darker color or darker colors. I will start with this middle phthalo blue. Again, I'm using a descriptive name for it just because I don't know the exact name in the Jieso range. Here at the top I used an even darker blue, and then I'm going to mix these two together and make a smooth transition and hope that my line of the horizon looks fairly straight and level. I also threw in a little bit of green here and there just to have a hint of green, because I'm going to have some greenish colors in the waves. So I'm kind of cleaning up that line, and I'm going to add some suggestions of waves in the distance by adding a touch of white here and there, like maybe we can see some of the distant foamy crests of waves. And I'm going to soften some of these a little bit because applying the pastel on this canvas creates quite a bit of texture. I can overcome the texture if I apply enough of the material and blend it. So what I started working on right there with a white pastel was the crest of this large wave in the middle of the scene. under it I'm gonna use some very light pale green. So what I'm trying to achieve here, and I need to explain this even though I've done similar drawings before, but in the wave itself we're going to have slightly different colors which will go from blue to slightly more greenish and turquoise colors, and the amount of, not only the color but the amount of value will vary also, because at the bottom of that wave, near the trough of the wave, we're going to have some darker values. That's where the water is thicker and deeper and there's shadow there. But near the crest of the wave, where the wave is sort of thinner, it's going to be more transparent or more translucent. And that's why I need to make it a lot lighter there. So in order to create that effect of translucency, I need to make sure that I have a nice contrast between the darker part of the wave near the bottom and the lighter part of the wave at the very top near the crest of the wave. And of course I have to be careful when blending not to push the darker values too hard, too fast towards that lighter area, because I want to create a very smooth transition between the two. The color I achieved initially, I didn't really like it that much, but I added a little bit more green and now it's much closer to what I wanted to achieve. I'm going to add a little bit more darker green and darker blue at the bottom, and then every now and then I will also add a little bit of this light phthalo blue, both at the bottom and also in the wave itself. I even added a touch of black for the darkest part of the wave, where it's kind of crashing and overflowing on the other side. I added a touch of darker green under the very foamy crest of the wave to create a little bit more contrast and shadow there, and then I added some splashing effects on that crest of the wave. Now along this curved shape of the wave, I'm going to add some foamy streaks, which are usually of lighter color. I can use white, but I need to be careful with that because some of these shapes are in shadow, so they can't be completely white most of the time. So I'm going to use other colors like a light green, maybe a light gray, very light gray, or a light blue, and then the white for the brightest areas. Or I can use the white sort of gently and then soften these marks or blend them a little bit using Tortillion, because Tortillions work pretty well with oil pastels. Anyway, what I want to achieve with these foamy streaks of water is to make the wave look more interesting, but also to follow the direction and the movement of the water, to show the shape and the movement of the wave. So I'm doing a little bit of refining and softening with a Tortillion, and I added a few touches of lighter foamy water here and there just to make it a bit more interesting. Just doing a little bit more refining with a Tortillion, and then I'm gonna tackle the rest of the wave. I added a touch of blue here and there. You can notice that every now and then I go back in and I add a touch of that light phthalo blue, which I use both for the water and the sky and the clouds. I need that color to be present in different parts of my drawing because I want to stay consistent with the colors I've used. I want the wave, I don't want the wave to be completely different in terms of colors. I want it to have some of the colors of the environment or of its surroundings, as it were. Now for this overflowing part of the wave, which is spilling on the other side, I'm going to use similar colors but slightly different values maybe. So I started with some light green and then a little bit more of the phthalo blue, or that lighter blue, and then a touch of darker green, and then I'm going to blend these. I'm just going to blend these gently and add some more details on top once I'm done with that. I'm achieving a very nice smooth transition here. If I don't like a certain color, when I'm blending colors I end up with a color that's a little bit different from what I intended, I can always add something else on top of it. Like if I feel like if it needs to be more greenish, I add a little bit more green. If I need it to be a little bit duller, I can do something about that as well, add a little bit of grayish or white. I don't know. I can play around with colors as well as with values. And here I'm adding some more of those foamy splashing details and adding them also along the length of this curved shape of the wave. Again, to suggest the shape of the wave as well as the movement of the water. And in this part here I am adding just a little bit more white because I want to make it a little bit brighter, like maybe that part of the wave is bulging out and reflecting a little bit more light. Because a wave is a three-dimensional object as well, even though some parts of it are obviously a little bit more transparent than others, and the foaminess and the splashing of the water makes things a little bit more complicated. So here at the foot of the wave, or the trough of the wave, I'm adding some slightly darker colors, mixing in a little bit of the darker blue and a little bit of green color. I want to make a gradual transition from the green onto the bluish color. I'm sorry about that, I'm almost losing my voice. I have a bit of a cold, but I'm going to be able to finish this video hopefully. Anyway, I'm adding some lighter blue details here and there. Like I said, I want to stay consistent with the colors throughout the scene. And I want to make a seamless transition from the greenish colors onto the more bluish ones. This lower portion is also going to have some foamy water, but it's going to be kind of flatter here because I want to make it look like the waves are washing out on the shore. And that's where I'm going to make the colors a little bit lighter. But with a white pastel I'm drawing some more of those foamy streaks in the water. Now there's another thing that I wanted to mention. If you like my videos, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe, because chances are you may never see one of my videos again. So maybe consider subscribing, and then you can check out some of my future videos. And if you want to see more content and full-length narrative videos, you can find that on my Patreon. Anyway, back to the drawing process. Now I'm adding a little bit more foamy details in this part of the wave here to the right. Some of these smaller details, like these splashing droplets, they can be a little bit difficult to draw with an oil pastel, because oil pastels are not that great at precision. Sometimes you can get some smaller details with them, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. Blending tools can help a little bit to a certain degree, but there's only so much you can do. And notice that I'm adding a little bit of light gray to this foamy part here, and I'm going to add a touch of blue as well. I want it a little bit more bluish. So you can see that this foam here is a little bit darker at the bottom because it's further away from the light source. So even though something appears white to us, and it is a white color, depending on its position relative to the light source, some parts of it will be completely white, whereas other parts will be a little bit darker, like grayish or bluish, depending on the environment and the lighting. I'm adding some more of these details, light details to the water, kind of smaller waves, and then kind of getting lighter and more foamy here as we get closer to the beach area, and the beach area will be in the bottom right corner. For that part I'm just going to use a little bit of this ochre to imitate the appearance of wet sand on the beach, and I'm just going to blend that a little bit. I'm going to make it look like a little bit of that sand is showing through the waves which are washing up on the shore. I don't want it to be completely white. I want the white foamy shapes to be interrupted by some bluish colors. But once I have enough of the bluish colors or darker colors to create contrast, I'm just adding a little bit of white on top of that to get the finished look of those waves which are washing up on the shore, one after the other. And after that I softened everything with a tortillon again, and here I'm just reworking this part a little bit, probably overdoing it a little bit at this point, but just making some final changes and again modifying that a little bit. The drawing is finished. I put my signature in the bottom left corner, and I hope you like the way it turned out. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and once again, if you want to see full-length videos and more content, check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.